That's right. It is a Thursday edition, orange and blue today. And Mace, I love the schedule release for when you and I do our tradition of going through the Broncos schedule. But something came up yesterday when we were looking at other teams' schedule going, hey, somebody can help or hurt the Broncos on the way.
Yeah, you wonder, first of all, was Sean Payton clapping when he saw this? Because he talks about the things he looks for first. For example, he looks at where the bye week is. Was he applauding when he saw the week 12 bye, for example? How soon did he look at the fact that the Chiefs had a bye right before facing the Broncos? Because we all know about the Andy Reid bye week thing.
Right.
So that's where then you start saying, okay, let's look at somebody else's schedule and then start impacting it, start seeing how that impacts the Broncos. And so that's what this show sort of focuses on, is the other schedules and how they fall. Because last year, how many times as we got down the stretch and we were looking at the playoff race, how many times did we talk about other teams' schedules?
Right.
Like, remember in the wild card race, and we talked a lot about the Bengals schedule.
Oh, yes.
And even though they had a bad record, how many times were we saying, oh, they've got this December run where they have the ability to get hot and they can get back in it. And what happened? They got hot and they got back in it. But as it turned out, they dug themselves too deep a hole to get out of it. It came up, I know, in the comment section responding to what we talked about with Indianapolis and, would the Colts have been in if Jonathan Taylor had not put the ball on the ground because you had the Bengals in the mix? Well, yeah, because the Colts won the tiebreaker over the Bengals too. If the Colts had been 9-8 and the Broncos have been 9-8 and the Bengals have been 9-8, and that's sort of the hole that the Bengals dug for themselves, but they did have that late season run to get back into it. So what are we going to be talking about potentially if it's a tight postseason race, and what are the other games that we're going to be looking at? So that's just, we're trying to kind of see over the horizon here and look at some of the other teams potentially that we're going to be talking about in December and what their games are. That's why this is a fascinating exercise. Yes, every game means the same in the big picture, but really, when we get to December, these ones tend to have a little bit higher leverage than some of the others.
Yeah, and for this exercise, I've looked after the Broncos bye, so 13 through 17. I did not look at week 18 because who knows, too many variables if that game means anything. I mean, it could be a Jarrett Stidham game in week 18 for the Broncos, right? So, but let's focus on Cincinnati because you bring them up, and they are the fly in the ointment. They are the team, perhaps most likely, there's another, that were out of the playoffs last year to get back in the playoffs this year, and that could cause a ruckus for the Broncos as they try to push for the postseason.
Pardon the pun, because this could be their playoff position, but total wild card. Because by the end of the season last year, they were among the 14 best teams in the NFL.
Yes.
But they weren't a playoff team because they dug the hole for themselves. And specifically, the defense dug that hole for them in the first 3 months of the year, and they couldn't get out of it in December into January. So the guy that maybe they're talking about a lot, if we were doing black and orange today instead of orange and blue today,
okay,
we probably would have done more shows on Al Golden than any other topic. Al Golden is the new defensive coordinator in Cincinnati. They hired him from Notre Dame after Notre Dame had that great season last year, going all the way to the championship game in the college football playoff. So they're tasking him with trying to do a quick rebuild on their defense. Of course, doing this in the shadow of the contract impasse with Trey Hendrickson as well. So kind of good luck with all that. But if the Bengals can get this defense quickly rebuilt going into the year, then, and if they can get their defense to just average, that's the thing. It's not like the Bengals have to have a great defense. They have to have an average defense. If their defense is average, they're instant contender, basically. And so what does their December, we should say, what does their last 6 weeks look like coming out of that Week 12 Broncos bye, Cease.
Yeah, the last games look like, and there's going to be a lot of intersecting here because these playoff seedings are going to be tight. 13 is at Baltimore. That's a big one. 14 is at Buffalo. 15 is versus Baltimore.
Yes.
And then 16, 17, 18, and whatever 18, but it's Miami, Arizona, Cleveland. But there's that stretch. And even before them, 2 games before, 11 and 12, it's Pittsburgh, New England, Baltimore, Buffalo, Baltimore. That's a tough stretch. We'll get to the Patriots in a little bit, but for the Bengals right there, that's the tell of your season. You've got some tougher early season games as well, but right there in that chunk, post Broncos bye, they're going to be facing playoff contender after playoff contender after playoff contender.
And here's an interesting thing from the Broncos' perspective. They're going to know the outcome of that Bengals-Ravens game before they play in Washington that weekend, because Bengals-Ravens is a Thanksgiving night game. So the Bengals and Ravens are going to have that one decided. So you're going to, as you're starting to look elsewhere, and this is something that's also going to come up with the Chiefs, because the Chiefs are playing on Thanksgiving as well against the Cowboys. So you're going to know what they've done and have an idea where they stack up relative to, as Sean Payton would say, relative to you before you go out and play your Week 13 game on Sunday night against the Commanders. So that's something to consider. But yeah, that's going to make or break their season. Now at Miami, against Arizona, Cleveland at home, the Bengals, kind of similar to the December stretch, they're going to know that they've got a pretty good chance to get 3 in the end. Now, at Miami could be tricky. And with Miami, it all depends on Tua. If Tua Tagovailoa is healthy, even with the hits they've taken, Tua gives them a shot. If Tua's not healthy, they're going to struggle. It all comes down to that for Miami. And we don't know if he's going to be able to stay upright. That's the big question for them. Arizona at home, that should be a win for Cincinnati, although Arizona could be tricky, and then Cleveland at home should be a win. But again, it's Week 18, or what's on the line in that game, who knows? So, But we're gonna know what the Bengals are, I think, before that stretch. Frankly, we're gonna find out in Week 4 when they come into Denver. We're gonna see that defense firsthand and see just how much they've been restored, and they're gonna get that test really a week before coming into Denver when they go into Minnesota, face the Vikings. Now, of course, quarterback transition with Sam Darnold moving on to Seattle, but the Vikings are going to give that Cincinnati defense kind of its first, if not exam, certainly a quiz, as the Bengals do open up at Cleveland against the Jaguars. So they definitely have a chance to kind of get their feet under them in Al Golden's new scheme. But then Minnesota will definitely pose some challenges. And then the Broncos, I think, give them their first real test. And then it gets more difficult for the Bengals in October, because they go from the Broncos to Lions, Packers, Steelers. And then into November, after playing the Jets to close October, the Bengals go Bears bye week. And then the stretch you talked about, Steelers, Patriots, Ravens, Bills, Ravens into December. Now, mention the Patriots there. We want to kind of discuss them because this is another wild card type of team.
Yes.
As bad as they were last year, Drake May played very well down the stretch, despite having little in the way of protection and little in the way of skill position help. They've done some things to help that. They're probably still really a year away from having everything they need in those areas. But bringing in Mike Vrabel as head coach, I think they're going to be the type of team where they've elevated their floor. And it's a question of whether Drake May and his skill set, Cease, is enough to where he can be that type of quarterback who's elevating people around him in much the same way that someone like Jaden Daniels proved he could be last year in Washington. So again, we saw some really outstanding things from Drake May down the stretch late. Is he that guy who elevates people around him? Does that talent kind of come to the fore? And if it does, then the Patriots become a team that you certainly can't sleep on, and could be that surprise wild card contender that nobody's really talking about.
Yeah, it's not just the Bills in the AFC East. And I'm glad you mentioned May last year, because now Vrabel's worth 2 wins just in his coaching. And with May, with better talent around him, and Travion Henderson there. I know a lot of Broncos fans wanted Henderson here. Well, he's there now, along with Ramondre Stevenson. They've got some weapons concerns and pass catchers, but that's a team that seems a year away. But Mace, we know how this league works. It's on its own time. We may think they're a year away, and Vrabel and May, remember the fit, the combination. Vrabel with that steady veteran presence, May with that rocking arm. And all these teams we talk about today, notice this: elite level quarterback play. If you don't think Drake May is an elite level quarterback, you just weren't paying attention last year.
And they have a 4-game stretch to start the season, Cease. Raiders at home, which is a very interesting game. And week 1 definitely gives you some outlier results, because generally speaking, it's very much a race to get ready by week 1, and nobody's completely ready anymore for that game.
Right.
So you always see some outcomes that don't necessarily reflect what the quality of the teams end up being down the line. But if they're a bit ready to go sooner than the Raiders are, especially the Raiders transitioning to the Chip Kelly offense, maybe you get a surprise result there. But New England opening with the Raiders and then at Miami again, who knows what they are, as they go as Tua goes. And then Pittsburgh in week 3. Maybe this is the year everything catches up with the Steelers. Who knows? I always say never count out a Mike Tomlin team. But at this moment, the quarterback situation looks decidedly underwhelming, as you know.
Yeah.
And then Carolina at home in week 4. Those games, you can't say any one of them is a surefire L for the Patriots. All those games are winnable for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would it surprise me at all to see the Patriots get 3-1 out of that opening quartet? Then they go at Buffalo in week 5. Yeah, it's probably a loss, but if it's a Patriots team that's built some confidence, and this is what happens when you have a young team that has some surprising results and gets their record up, you get a confident team that starts to believe it's more than you thought it could be. And then you get results that go beyond what people expected. And look, maybe it happens in the first month with the Broncos. It started to happen in the second month last year, and even starting in week 3 in Tampa Bay, you start to get those results that generally speaking aren't expected outside that building. And then that team, they're a surprise, right? They start exceeding the predicted outcome, at least the predicted outcome outside of the building. And so that's something that you have to look at, and how improved form ends up resulting in improved form down the stretch and a different outcome than everyone outside the building projects.
I love how young teams, Mace, they don't know they're not supposed to be that good yet.
They don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
And that can be to your advantage. You remember how often we heard from the Broncos, young and hungry can be a dangerous combination.
What are the Patriots?
Patriots might be that type of team this year, that if they get some results under them early, they end up disrupting the wild card race. And then maybe you're sitting there in December, and to go down the stretch of their games after week 13, Giants bye, Bills at home, at the Ravens, at the Jets, Miami. Buffalo, obviously a tough one. At Baltimore, a tough one. But then closing with the Jets and the Dolphins. Again, the Dolphins, if they're without Tua, not a team that's going to cause many problems. All of a sudden, you might be looking at them and saying, we need them to maybe get upset by somebody here. So this is the thing. The Broncos, we may be looking at a team like the Patriots being a surprise team that you have to watch out for in the wild card race. If we're talking about the Broncos in the wild card race, these teams that we just talked about are, if it's strictly wild card. Now let's get into bigger things. Division title, hopefully.
Yes.
Playoff seeding, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Playoff seeding if you're a division champion. You know, they're the Chiefs and the Chargers to talk about, and then one team that out on the outside that could be particularly impactful on that. Where do you want to start with these teams?
I was going to go with Houston because the impetus of the show, I was doing fantasy football research because I'm a nerd, and you always look at the end of the year for fantasy playoffs, right? So I'm looking at the end of the year for Texans. I was like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Like all of these games are going to help Denver. Most of these games are going to help Denver in that, weeks 13 through 17. So like they face the Texans, whatever week that is, Mace. And, it's go Broncos. But then after that, if you're a Broncos fan, you might be saying go Texans.
Yes. So let's start with week 13, as you mentioned, coming out of the bye.
Big one.
Okay. Week 13, they faced the Colts in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Now we go to week 14, Houston at Kansas City on Sunday Night Football.
Yep.
Week 14, Houston against Arizona. Or week 15, Houston against Arizona, pardon me. Week 16, Houston hosting the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yes.
Week 17, Houston at the Chargers. There you go.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting one.
By the way, if you want to go to the game, tickets are as low as $39 if you want to go Texans Chargers at SoFi Stadium.
All right. I like that. And the Texans last year with the skins on the wall, it's different from the NBA where you need those scars. In the NFL, you can just get there. But the Texans have been building every single year, making it, losing, making it, winning, and then now hoping for a deep Super Bowl run. So, yeah, they face the Broncos, but they're going to face some Broncos opponents that will be jockeying for position even within the division, as the Broncos may get that AFC West title. The Texans will help them out if they're going to do that.
Is this the year it finally happens for them? That they finally go over the top?
Perhaps. I mean, when we talked about the Broncos schedule, I look at Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Jaden Higgins, and Jalen Knoll with Dalton Schultz and with Joe Mixon. It's a hell of an offense, man. It's a really good offense, and they're well coached. We're talking elite coaches here. We're talking about Vrabel last time with the Patriots. Let's talk about D'Amico, man. He's getting those skins on the wall like John Fox, so he'll have this team playoff ready. And because of that, it's going to help them out when they can beat the Chargers. They can beat the Raiders. They've got some opponents that are really going to help jockey for position here.
So the other thing with the Texans is they have the advantage of being in the AFC South, which I think we can agree it's the worst division in the AFC by some distance. To put it kindly, it's a division in transition.
You're so nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you want me to say? It's
not great, Bob.
Yeah. I could say that the AFC South sucks. I'd rather just simply say the AFC South is a division in transition.
Well, the Texans are right on top, and they are the creme de la creme of that division.
Because I don't know, like the Jaguars could be interesting. The Jaguars could be a team we mentioned like the Patriots, because Liam Cohen could be terrific as a head coach. We don't know. They could unlock something extraordinary and unique with Travis Hunter. They could unlock the potential that's always been there with Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback. We don't know. We don't know yet. So that's why I prefer to say in transition. Okay. It's my way of acknowledging the unknown. I live a lot of my life with I don't know.
Yeah. Are the Texans among the NFL elite or the AFC elite? Because that's the thing we have the conversation. There's Baltimore, there's Buffalo, and littering end. Are the Broncos in that conversation yet? Perhaps not. Well, are the Texans in that conversation?
You forgot Kansas City.
I don't put them in the elite.
Well, didn't they just win the conference?
How many one-score games did they win?
Wasn't it 11? They won them.
I know.
That's the point. They
won
those games.
Do the football gods reward that the next year? It's like catch and touchdown. Well, the guy scored 20 touchdowns. Yeah, the next year he's going to score 10. The NFL works in weird and mysterious ways. The football gods smile on you, and then sometimes they don't.
Eventually, it does catch up to you, but you talk about that when it catches up to you.
I'm just ahead.
I know. At this moment, you still have to say they are this until proven otherwise.
So are the Texans in that top 3 then?
Not yet.
They're close.
They're close, but
even though the division sucks, they're close.
They're close, but I would also say this. Sometimes you're close and you never get there. And maybe it's just because I'm sitting here right now and just there, you can't see it here, but I am looking at a little trinket that has a Houston Oilers logo. And those who are historians of the game recall probably the most memorable set of Houston football teams in the NFL were the Love Ya Blue teams of the late 1970s, right through 1980, that had Bum Phillips coaching, of course, Wade's dad.
Couldn't get past Pittsburgh.
Yes, Earl Campbell at running back. And Bum Phillips, after the 1979 season, because they lost back-to-back AFC championship games in Pittsburgh, and they get there and they come home to the Astrodome and there's this huge rally and Bum addresses, like the Astrodome's filled, 50,000 people to welcome them home after they lost the AFC championship for a second year in a row. And he says, last year we knocked on the door. This year we banged on the door. Next year we're going to kick it in. And so 1980, it's like, we're going to kick in the door. That was their mantra. And that year they lost in the wild card round to the Raiders and Bum Phillips got fired. The point is, sometimes it never happens. It's sad but true. And so that's why I look at Houston and, okay, can they take the next step? Yeah, potentially, but sometimes it doesn't happen. I mean, we've been waiting for Buffalo to take that next step, and it still hasn't happened yet. We've been waiting for Baltimore to take that final step with Lamar Jackson, and it still hasn't happened yet. The only team that has come close to that has taken that final step to the Super Bowl, but then they lost in the Super Bowl in this current era, of course, is Cincinnati and Joe Burrow. And that's why, even though they missed the playoffs last year, you keep looking and saying, okay, if Al Golden's the guy who can kind of just get this Bengals defense to average, then they're right back in it, because we have seen that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase can go in there to Kansas City in January and win. Like, we have the evidence there. We have seen it happen, whereas we have not seen it happen with anybody else. That's the whole thing. That's why I think that's why back in January, all the national media was just foaming at the mouth to want the Bengals in the playoffs and not the Broncos, because they looked at the Bengals and they thought, well, they're the ones that can beat Kansas City because they've done it before, even though no, the Broncos deserve to be in the playoffs because they had the better record, because they won more games. They were 10-7. The Bengals were 9-8. Were the Bengals among the 14 best teams at the end of the season at that particular moment? Yes, they were, but it doesn't matter. It does not matter, because they were 9-8 and the Broncos were 10-7. End of story. That, it's relevant. That's the best thing about the NFL compared to college football, where they're selecting the playoffs based on a bunch of people sitting around a room and looking at Excel documents and all that crap. It's just, you earn your way into the playoffs. There aren't people deciding this crap. It's not a council of elders or any dumb stuff like that. I want to use stronger words, but this is a family show. It is objectively decided. It's not people deciding it. Anyway,
it's a wonderful thing.
This is why I like pro football better than college football. It's why I don't like judgment sports like gymnastics and figure skating and whatnot. I like things where it's just decided by what's out there on the field. Anyway, where the
let's make a judgment on the Los Angeles Chargers then to wrap up this show, Mace, because the Chargers will be competing for the AFC West along with the Chiefs and the Broncos. Don't think the Raiders are there yet.
No,
this one's big too.
The Raiders, when we talk about them, I just want to make this clear. With the Raiders, I think they're a fourth place team. I think they're the best fourth place team in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
But they're a fourth place team that wins 7 to 9 games. Very strong fourth place team, but that's what they are. The AFC West is the best division in football because it has the highest basement. The Chargers, let's start here. They open with Kansas City in Brazil at Las Vegas, and then the Broncos at home. So start there. The Chargers open with the entire AFC West. So we're going to know right away where they stand in this exceptionally tough division.
Yep.
So we talk about the race to get better, the race to be ready right there at the start. So they've got these huge games when everyone is still kind of forming as a team. They've got this pressure to be ready right away. So if they're not all the way there, they might pay a pretty dear price for that because of what they have right there at the start of the season.
And the end of the season, which we're going to get to, is brutal for the Chargers.
Yes.
So you better win early.
They have their bye week the same time as the Broncos, week 12, the week before Thanksgiving. Coming out of the bye, they play the Raiders. It's at home, but we know Raiders at Chargers is effectively a Raiders home
game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the Raiders have a very strong fan base in Southern California. Then the following week, the Eagles come to Los Angeles to play the Chargers. That's the defending champs.
Yep.
Then it's at Kansas City.
Ouch.
Okay. Then it's at Dallas. And as we discussed on Wednesday's show, if Dak Prescott is healthy, that's no easy game.
Mm-hmm.
Then week 17, Houston in Los Angeles. And then, of course, week 18 at Denver. Okay. Woo! Man, that's rough.
Yeah.
If the Chargers want to be a playoff team, two things. They've got to start fast. They have got to be ready to go right from the jump against those three AFC West opponents. They probably need to start 3-0. They need to get that win over the Chiefs in the neutral site in Brazil, which is a home game for them technically. The thing is, the Chargers, their home environment being what it is, does it make a difference if they're playing in Inglewood or in Brazil? It's kind of all the same.
No. And before their bye, Mace, I see 5 kind of not gimmies, but 5 easier games. That's only 5. After their bye, I mean, my God, by week 12, you had better have 8 wins.
Yeah.
If you're the Chargers, you have designs on getting 10 and getting in that range of the postseason. After their bye is brutal.
So let's actually look at the difference in schedules between the Broncos and the Chargers. Remember, the Broncos finished in 3rd place and the Chargers finished in 2nd. So their schedules are the same. Of course, they play each other. The difference is they play, the Broncos play 3rd place opponents from the AFC East, the AFC North, and the NFC North, and the Chargers get the 2nd place teams. So the Broncos get the Jets, the Bengals, and the Packers. The Chargers get the Dolphins in Miami, and the Broncos get the Jets in London. So advantage Broncos getting the neutral site and getting the Jets. The Chargers get the Vikings at home, and the Broncos get the Packers. That's probably a push. I may say slight advantage Chargers there, just because I think the Vikings do take a step back transitioning to J.J. McCarthy in his first year as a starter. What do you think?
Yeah, and they don't even name him the starter yet as of this recording in the middle of May. That's a team that won't have as many wins. I'm not going to say half as many as last year, but predicting 9 wins for Minnesota sounds about right.
And then they get Pittsburgh and the Broncos get the Bengals. I actually think that's advantage Chargers.
Yeah.
So on balance, the Chargers, we're talking about a tough slate for the Chargers, a tough row to hoe, but I think the Broncos actually got a little bit of a tougher schedule, even though they got the 3rd place rather than the 2nd place. So I was going in a direction when I started that. It just kind of shows how we're sort of organically doing this, and we think about this as you're getting the rough draft thoughts here, and yet I think the Broncos got the tougher end of that. But I think the Chargers got the tougher run in at the end of the schedule here.
Oh, their finishes.
Yes.
Oh, just incredible.
The key for the Chargers is going to be they're going to have to make the most of the start. If they have to, in my opinion, they need to start 3-0, actually 4-0, because that fourth game is against the Giants. They play Washington at home, then at Miami, and then the Colts at home, and then the Vikings at home, and then the Titans, Pittsburgh at Jacksonville. Okay. And then, so what do you think they need to be from those 11 games to feel good? 8-3.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's the magic number too.
And then you need a couple after the bye, but do they win a game after the bye? Their schedule after their bye is absolutely brutal.
If you go 8-3, then you're asking yourselves to go 500. If you're a good team, a playoff team, yeah, those are tough games, but you ought to be able to go 500. And then if you don't, you weren't worthy. 8-3 is what they need to be in those first 11 games. Preferably 9-2, but yeah, at least 8-3. If they're 7-4 in those first 11 games, they're missing the playoffs.
Yep.
Think about that. 7-4. If the Broncos are 7-4 at their bye,
it's right there.
They're feeling pretty. I mean, I had them at 7-4.
Yes, you did. I had them at 8-3.
If the Broncos are 7-4 at their bye, I think they're in great shape for a postseason bid. If the Chargers are 7-4 at the bye, I think they're cooked. Not all 7-4 records are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually that's really something to think about here this year. Like looking at this schedule, the Chargers are probably washed at 7-4, whereas the Broncos at 7-4 are going to be in great shape.
It's going to be interesting to see how this season plays out, Andrew Mason, and along the way, we'll be focused on the Broncos, but keeping an eye on at least these 4 teams we're talking about. Don't sleep on New England, anybody.
Yeah,
don't sleep on them.
That's the sleeper. That's the team that could really just go in there and shock the heck out of everybody in the AFC race.
Everyone will say surprise, and OBT viewers will say not a surprise.
This might also be because just I'm really high on Drake May as well.
He played good football and didn't have much around him.
Yeah. That being said, they do have a guy in there that nobody in Broncos country likes, and that's Josh McDaniels. But they're not asking Josh McDaniels to be the head coach. They're just asking him to call plays. Josh McDaniels, head coach, bad, terrible, dreadful. Keep him away. Josh McDaniels, play caller, pretty good. They're only asking him to do what he's proven he can do well. So that's fine. Just keep him away from the keys. Mike Vrabel's not going to let him have the keys, so that's okay.
That's fine. That should work for them. What works for us, Mace, is helping us out on YouTube. How can folks do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell,
so that you never wait. I
messed
up. Yeah, I went too far. So you had me going too fast. So you
never
miss
vid.
That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials. What a fun show, dude.
Yeah, it was surprising.
At Mace Denver, I'm at Cecil Lammey. OBT is a BFD. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty,